All right, we're recording. So welcome everybody to our Preparing Written Testimony workshop. Tonight, if everyone can mute their phones as we get started and their computers. So for those of you who don't know, Strategies for Children is an advocacy policy organization that works to make sure that Massachusetts is investing the resources needed for children birth through 5. And you can see where the work that we do is around policy development and monitoring. We don't do our own research, but we do commission research when it's needed, communications and outreach. And tonight we're going to talk about advocacy as we get started. So if you could put in chat where you are Zooming from right now and tell us a little bit about who is with us tonight. So I see a lot of familiar faces. And just let us know. We'll read through chat to see where you're Zooming from. Tell us a little bit about your program. It'd be great to see. So Cynthia says hello. Everyone's typing. I'm learning to talk while people type. Great. We have South Hamilton, Nancy Tosa. Welcome. Okay, Lexington, Swampscott, Newton. This morning we had somebody from Nantucket. Lynn, great. Scenic Bourne. Great. Plymouth, Lexington. Great. It's great to have so many folks from different parts of the state, different kinds of programs. And as Marissa said, any questions that you have, you can put it in the chat and we'll answer them as we go along. So we know that right now that there is fear and anxiety, uncertainty, the need for answers and accurate information, and that we know before COVID-19, even at full enrollment, the childcare market was broken. We know that our field is complex with many different funding streams, both public and private, and we know that programs are going to need flexible, stable, additional funds to have a chance in this new reality. We know we have a long way back and things will be different as we return to a new reality. But hearing from you about real life, day-to-day challenges will help inform both our advocacy and communication strategies and help us thinking about how we match up resources and need. And we know we'll rely on the innovation and creativity and the can-do attitude of the early education and care community, but that's not going to be enough. We are going to need to work together to advocate for additional resources. So right now in the chat, we're going to use chat a lot, or type what you hear, what you think of, what words or images come to mind when you hear advocacy. So when you hear the word advocacy, what comes to your mind? And you can just put that in chat. And Marissa, if you could facilitate and read those off.
Sure thing. So we have making needs known, persuasion, educating people, having a voice, representation, positive pressure, getting the word out, being a voice, standing up for beliefs, support.
Great. And then when we think about, tonight we're going to be really talking about the legislature, but we know there are so many different key decision makers. And when you think about doing advocacy or standing up or supporting or speaking out, really thinking about all the different people who you have to make your case to. Tonight we're going to really focus on the Joint Committee on Education because that's who's holding the oversight hearing. And now if you could in the chat, here you are at 6:06 on a Monday at a webinar, but what are some of the barriers when it comes to advocacy? So what are some of the things that get in the way? And you can just use chat and let us know what you're thinking.
Life gets in the way.
Life does get in the way.
Knowing who to contact and how to contact them. Exhaustion. Time challenges, just time in general, time management.
Yeah.
Knowing who to contact again.
Right. And those are all very common barriers. Time, don't know who to, wonder if it makes a difference. Is anyone going to care? Who am I? What do I have to offer that somebody else can't say? And we'll talk a little about those barriers and why it's so important that the people who are doing the work every day are part of advocacy and influencing the policy. So the first thing that everybody needs to know is who represents you. And I will not do a pop quiz because this is we want it to be a supportive learning environment. But everybody should go to wheredoivote.ma.com and you type in your home address, and you can, a form will pop up and we'll have all of your elected officials. And in our Advocacy 101, we cover, everybody in Massachusetts is represented by our 2 U.S. senators, Senator Elizabeth Warren and Senator Ed Markey. Everybody in Massachusetts is represented by the governor and lieutenant governor, the attorney general. And then it's based on your home address of who represents you at the State House and in Washington, D.C., and in your local communities. One question we have gotten often is if you don't live and work in the same place, and your power is as a voter. So the people who represent where you live, that's where you have the most power. If you're running a program or teaching in a program in another community, you should also know who those representatives are and build a relationship with them, but knowing that the people who represent you are going to really have a high priority for you as a constituent. And then when we think about the State House, so this is the State House, and typically if there was an oversight hearing, this is where we would all be going to watch it. You could always watch it online, but it's in Boston, and knowing the different branches of government is important. So we know this is Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito, and we have their hometowns where they live in parentheses, because unlike some states, Massachusetts does not have a governor's mansion. The governor lives in his or her community, and so does the lieutenant governor. So you don't have to go to the State House to necessarily see Charlie Baker. You can see him at Stop and Shop or at CVS, or when he's walking around the neighborhood. But knowing, we also always include photos because you need to know what they look like. So if you see them, you'll know. The governor and lieutenant governor we often see. And this is what education looks like in Massachusetts. So we know we have 3 departments of education. We have 3 boards of education, and then 3 commissioners. And we also have a secretary of education, Secretary Jim Pizer. And he is a member of the governor's cabinet, and he's Governor Baker's education advisor. But you can see that each commissioner has a board, so the board is really who oversees the commissioner. And this is important, again, to get back to that, like, who do you contact about what? So we know that kindergarten falls under the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So that would be where you would talk about kindergarten. We know birth through 5 and school age falls under the Department of Early Education and Care, and then higher ed around the community college and state systems and, the public universities. So if we transition over to the legislature, we know in Massachusetts we have 40 state senators and 160 state representatives. So that works out to be, in your districts, every senator has about 5 state representatives that represents the same area. So 40 compared to 160, the folks who are state representatives are there's more of them, and they have less of a geographic district to represent, or population. We know the senators, there's only 40 in the entire state, so they each have big chunks of Massachusetts. You have 1 state senator and 1 state representative depending on where you live, and that's what you would find out on that wheredoivote.ma.com. It's important to also know who the leaders are. So the Speaker of the House is Robert DeLeo. So he's the leader of the 160 House Representatives. And Senate President Karen Spilka is the leader of the Senate. Each of those chambers appoint their leaders. So they first have to get elected to the legislature, and then the members elect them. And so the Speaker and the Senate President, as the leaders of the chambers, really help shape what topics are taken up. They usually have priorities for the legislative term. And again, they live in the communities. So while they represent their own communities where they live, they also have leadership positions and are really attuned to what's happening across the state. And tonight we're going to talk about the Joint Committee on Education. So again, to see what they look like, this is Chairwoman who's Representative Alice Peisch, and the chairman is Senator Jason Lewis. And some committees in that state house are separate. So there's a House Committee on Ways and Means, a Senate Committee on Ways and Means. The Education Committee is a joint committee. And we'll talk, as part of your getting prepared, is to go look at the page that shows you who's on the Education Committee. Because if your elected official is on the Education Committee, you have a double opportunity because they represent you. So it's important to know when you're submitting testimony, who are you writing to? And as we talked about, you want to understand the different branches of government. So that was kind of a high level of our state level. Who you need to contact about what. So where are decisions getting made, what decisions are getting made, and then the how. And so we know that one way to do it is file a bill. We have 2 years in Massachusetts to get bills passed. The state budget is something that typically happens every year. Currently, right now, we don't have an updated state budget for fiscal year 21, but we are using a 1/12 budget, which means they're funding at the same level that they funded last month. We have elections that are coming up in November. We have regulations. So the Department of Early Education creates regulations, right? They created minimum requirements for reopening. So that was the department making those decisions. And then we have executive orders. And that was a mechanism that the Baker administration used to temporarily suspend childcare. So some of it can be, you have to figure out what the mechanism is, and then, is there a chance to weigh in or not? You want to be aware of other hot topics. And right now we know, obviously, COVID-19 is a topic that people are talking about. We're talking about racism and institutional racism and dismantling it. We're talking about the impacts of COVID on Black and brown people. And we're also talking about K-12. And that question keeps coming up. What's going to happen in the fall? What's going to happen with K-12? And we'll talk a little bit about how we believe at Strategies, these conversations have to be much stronger linked. You have to do your homework to get accurate information. Part of the challenge right now is in the absence of communication, combined with fear and anxiety and wanting to do the right thing for children, there has been a lot of misinformation that has been spreading, which can just increase anxiety, and it's hard to know what to do if you're not sure where the answers are coming from. So we often say, don't say, this lady said that we had to have, a tarp covering the classroom, or this lady said cubbies aren't a good divider for the wall. You want to make sure that you're getting really good, accurate information, and to ask questions. Where did you hear that? Is it in writing? You want to connect with groups. There are so many groups working right now in Massachusetts to help support early education and care. And then don't be intimidated by the process. Sometimes we know the process is set up and it can feel like it's against us. But right now, while you're working on this reopening, we also know this is a great opportunity to be doing advocacy. So when you think about hearings, there are a couple of different kinds. So a legislative committee hearing is really about a piece of legislation that's been filed. So every bill that's filed at the State House gets a hearing. And there are typically between 5,000 and 6,000 bills filed every year for 2 years, every session at the State House. So last year, they had the legislative hearing on all bills related to early education and care on July 2nd. So that means any bill that they put to that committee, put around early education and care and school age, was heard that day. So you have the opportunity to submit testimony both in person and in writing for or against a bill. The budget hearing is specifically about the state budget process, and you typically would be asking for an amount of money or some language. You would maybe want to see a program continue. And budget hearings, they also have them, on different topics. They have an education hearing every year. And now what we're talking about tonight is an oversight hearing. And this is a mechanism used to bring subject matter that's a hot topic, and that the legislature wants to hear from experts in the field. They want to bring experts, frontline people who are doing the work every day. So it's a real intentional way to get information back to the legislature. So as we think about as you prepare for written testimony, and first we have to acknowledge all of this happened very quickly. So we appreciate that people are paying attention and ready to jump into action. So the first thing you're going to do is think about the committee, and I'll show you the link during Q&A of where you would go to find that. Then you really want to think about the issue. Now, you guys are all experts on this issue, so don't doubt what you know is valuable. It's very valuable. You do this work every day. Legislators have to be, experts in transportation and healthcare and financing, and you guys are experts. They need to hear from us about your expertise. Then you want to think about what are the 2 or 3 things that you want to make sure that you say. And what we've learned from this morning is really to be specific. I am Dottie McDevitt. I live on Cape Cod. This is the programs I work with. This is how many children and families we're serving. So you really want to be specific. We're going to talk about budgets. So if you have any budget information or the implications of any of the decisions and how it's impacting you, using real numbers can be really effective. And then again, it's your story, personalize it, and then prepare it in writing. So we put together this guide, and it really just helps you lay out kind of how you should organize it. So one of the first things to think about is, are you representing you or are you speaking on behalf of your organization? And both are fine, but if you're speaking for you, you want to make sure that, or if you're trying to speak for your organization, you want to use that logo and that information, you want to make sure that your supervisor or your board, that someone's aware that you're going to speak on behalf of the organization. And then we're going to include in a follow-up email the testimony that I delivered, so you'll be able to see how you say, hello, chairperson, Chairwoman Feisch, Chairwoman Lewis, and members of the committee. These virtual hearings are a little bit different, so that written testimony, I think, is even going to be more powerful, because I think legislators don't have the opportunity to be in the building and talk with each other like that. So the written testimony, I think, will be a really powerful way to send the message. So again, the first paragraph, you want to get as specific as you can, where your program is located, because that's giving them a connection to if it's maybe one of their districts, what your annual budget is. The second paragraph, we've heard a lot of stories of what programs are doing to make it work right now during reopening. We've heard, we're thinking about our staffing schedules. We're thinking about charging more parent tuition. We're talking about using reserves or credit or negotiating no rent, or we got the PPP. So any really specific information you can share would be helpful. And then the third paragraph is really about what solutions. And again, part of our follow-up email, we are going to send you, we've pulled out some recommendations from testimony that's already been submitted. So you can say, does any resonate with you? Do you kind of want to amplify something that you've heard? Is there something very specific that you're thinking about would help? Without getting too into the weeds, the legislature is working on a supplemental budget right now. And in that budget, the House and the Senate both agreed on creating a trust fund to support public and private programs. Because they're hearing from people in the field that while, K-12 is financed one way, early education and care is financed very differently. So it has made a difference in even just the way that they're putting, forth some recommendations for the budget. The third paragraph, you kind of those suggestions, and then finally you have to thank the committee. So thank you for your leadership. Thank you for accepting this testimony. Make sure you put your contact information either in the email that you send or on the testimony so they know how to get back to you. You will not probably get a gotcha question. There won't, if you do get a follow-up question, if you know the answer, let them know. If you don't, you can say, I'm going to figure that out, or I'm going to find out some more information about that. In the follow-up email, we will also send some of the questions that legislators asked for the first part of the hearing last week. So you can see what were they interested in hearing more about from the people who provided oral testimony. So part one. Watch the oversight hearing. So it was 3 hours. We know that you might not have 3 hours, but we're suggesting and encouraging to watch the first 10 minutes because you'll get a sense for kind of how they opened. For example, I had the opportunity to testify at the hearing last week, And Rep. Peisch and Senator Lewis both started out so strong with a clear understanding of the issues that I didn't have to say my opening paragraph because they said it. So part of it is you want to kind of hear what they're talking about, and as you're preparing your written testimony, you can say things like, as you know, early education is very expensive. As you know, our financing model is different than K to 12. So you're acknowledging that you're kind of tuned in and paying attention. You want to write your testimony, you want to tell your story. You want to proofread it, you want to have somebody else read it, and then you want to proofread it again. And again, like, this is kind of part of being your best self and making sure that you're kind of taking all of the steps to send a clear message. You're going to send it to the members of the Joint Committee on Education and your legislators. So in the follow-up email, we'll give you their email addresses for the Joint Committee on Education. You're going to send it to the chair people. You can also send it to the committee members. But then you want to send a copy of whatever you send to your own state legislators. And if you don't know them yet, it's a great opportunity to say, hello, I'm Nancy Toso. I just wanted to share some of testimony that I share with the Education Committee. Because that's part of how there's momentum happening at the State House, is if it's, yes, the Education Committee is hearing this issue, but if other legislators start saying, hey, listen, I'm hearing from people in my district, and I have a better understanding of what the challenges are, it's really helpful to help move things along. And most importantly, to follow up. No one-hit wonders. It can be very exhilarating to send that testimony up and think that you're done. You want to follow up. We know that this is going to be a process of reopening, of thinking about parent demands, of understanding what supports you need, what technical assistance you need. So really thinking about how you're going to follow up. And it's a great opportunity for a second interaction to say, you know, thank you for the opportunity to send the testimony, checking in if you have any questions or need any more information. So that's a lot of information that I just gave to you. And Marissa, do you want to, is there anything in chat that we should know about?
So we don't have any right now, but I can start with just a question that we got from the earlier session just to get the ball rolling. So earlier we were asked about whether, if you belong to a group of directors or family child care providers, if it's better to send a group letter or an individual letter. What are your thoughts on that?
So we talked this morning about how a group letter is pretty powerful. So if you can get 40 people from a region or from a prototype of programs to sign on, that would be really powerful to hear. And then each person sends it also to their own legislator. You don't have to do a group letter, but if you can get together in a group, so instead of sending 40 letters that say the same exact thing, to get together and have a kind of a sign of collaboration would be helpful. Because remember, legislators and their staff are reading everything that comes in. It does not go to a kind of secret pile. They really are listening to the feedback.
When should someone follow up with the legislator? Should they wait a period of time before responding?
It's a good question. So probably give them a little bit of time. The other thing that might be helpful is if something happens, if your program reopens, if you have another question, if you read a story in the Boston Globe or a national newspaper or media that is interesting and you want to send to them, it's a good way to follow up. Sometimes people get discouraged because they email and they feel like no one's listening and they don't hear back. Another tactic when you do that is when you email, you should say in the email, is there a staff person that I should be following up with? Right, so that you know that they're, and again, they're all working remotely too. So the legislators and staff who typically sit in the same offices are trying to, they've developed communication strategies. But it's okay to ask who you can, I don't know what they're doing about calling their offices. Let's have a test case. Somebody call the office and see what happens. Or even the staff are typically checking the legislators' email addresses. Sometimes you're going to get an auto response and they'll say things like, thank you for your email. If you don't live in my district, it may take me some time, because again, they're prioritizing people that live in their district.
Do you have any suggestions for what asks someone should include for the legislature?
So this happened last time, when I gave my testimony, one of the things I recommended was we called for a joint meeting of the boards of Department of Early Education and Care and Elementary and Secondary Education, because we keep hearing that people are feeling like, I want to know what's happening in K-12. We know locally those conversations are happening, but we believe that this is going to require unprecedented collaborations. So calling for that, meeting is a way to signal they should be working together. We also called for our legislators to join us in advocating for more federal dollars. To really think about, like, could they write us a letter to our delegation to say we need another package to help support people in Massachusetts. We also talked about how we think about state funding. So how do we look at housing and healthcare and education and K-12 and make sure we're being much more intentional? We've heard about PPE, right? So if you have an ask around PPE, maybe it's like, can we be part of a bulk purchasing program? I can't afford, my program, if we could relieve that pressure from my program, that would be helpful. Another thing that we asked for in our testimony was about making early education and care providers essential personnel. So if there are benefits like testing or financial benefits that are going to essential personnel, that we are part of that, those benefits as well. And we'll send you, because it's always interesting, because part of it is where you sit will help, define what you're asking for. As we're thinking of more questions, Ryan, who is our intern this summer, has been monitoring other states, because we know we're not alone in trying to figure this out. So Ryan, do you want to share some highlights of what you're learning and what you've been looking at?
Sure. So I have primarily been following how other states have gone about navigating the time of the pandemic. So some states never closed their childcare, like Massachusetts did. Rhode Island was actually the only state that fully shut down all programs, and it was kind of split between those that shut down all of them except emergency care providers and those that never closed. I also have compared the EEC health and safety guidance that was released to that released of other states. Our guidelines are pretty much in line. And I'm also following kind of the outbreaks that are occurring in childcare facilities throughout the country. There's reports of massive numbers that are stemming from childcare facilities in Texas especially. So I think that underscores the necessity of PPE and kind of working with the legislator, working with EEC to get childcare providers the protection equipment they need.
Thanks, Ryan.
Amy, we have another question in the chat. So can you clarify, who should people be following up with? Is it the committee chairs, their own legislatures, or both?
So I would do both. And I think you want to think about, again, your power is with your legislators. So this is also another opportunity to continue to build that relationship. So I would follow up with your legislators first and say, and ask for advice. Is there anything else I should be doing? Is there anybody else that should hear my story? I would let them know that you have also sent your testimony to the chairs. And the way that the committees are structured is committees have staff dedicated just to that content area. So Representative Alice Peisch has staff that work with her, with her district work, but as chair of the committee, you also have staff that are dedicated to that content. So they have support. Your legislator might just have one staff person working on many different issues. So you are going to be a huge resource to your own legislator. But again, you want to check, like, what committees are they on? Are they on the education committee? Do they have young children? We've talked with many legislators who are living this in real time as they're making decisions for their young children as well. So just doing, if you go to the, I'll stop sharing the slides, and then I'm going to share the website. If you go to no, of course it's not here. If you go to the Joint Committee on Education, you will be able to see their their bio. You can click on their name and you can see their bios. You can see what bills they filed. If you have a question and you wonder, like, is this, you want to see, like, have they been supported in the past? You want to do your homework the same way that if someone came to do an interview for you in your, for a job, or somebody wanted to tell you something about your program, you would want to know, like, did they do their homework? Do they know, like, our policies? Do they know where we're located? Think about when you're doing family intakes. So here is the page for the Joint Committee on Education. You can see the Senate members, Senator Lewis, Senator Lovely, and then you can see there are fewer senators than representatives because, again, remember, there's only 40 state senators and 160 House members. So you can see who is on the committee, and then you can see here's the tabs, what bills are before them, the hearings. So this is another place where you can see, this is old, these are the committees that have already happened, and then you can learn about so you can see that the Committee on Education is all matters concerning education through grade 12. So that includes early ed and care. And then you can see over here, it has the upcoming hearing, which is for tomorrow morning at 10.
So would you say that a couple of days is probably an appropriate length of time to wait for follow-up, especially because the coronavirus situation is so fluid and changes so rapidly?
That makes sense. That makes sense. I would say a couple of days. So I would maybe they make a week. If this hearing is tomorrow, and then you send your written testimony, maybe by next Monday or Tuesday, you're following up. And it should be, what else can I do? Do you need more information? And again, if you don't hear back, don't get discouraged. If you want to connect with us, we can help. If we know the staff person, we can help give you that contact information as well. So why doesn't everybody in chat just type one word about how you're feeling right now? You just got all this information. Or also if you've ever submitted testimony before. Oh, Sissy's motivated, we're gonna follow up. The same thing, this is the same process for the Board of Early Education and Care. So I think the board is gonna have another board meeting. And now that we are all moving virtual, it's been harder to take public testimony in person or live. So it's another opportunity to put things in writing. We have been asking for people to share their stories, because it's so critical, but we are seeing more people willing to talk about what's happening and how you can be part of the process. So I would love to hear more about the person who was fascinated. So Shada, can you come off mute and tell us what you mean by that? I love that word.
I don't really know how to explain this. I actually thought I had signed up for a different workshop, so this workshop is not what I anticipated, but I just find it all very interesting. I didn't know about any of this, and now I do.
Great. What
So
workshop are you looking for?
Hopefully someday I'll be able to use it.
Shana, we still got time. It's not due until tomorrow at 5. So somebody asked that question. The committee has asked for all written testimony to be in tomorrow by 5 p.m. But if it doesn't get in by tomorrow at 5, you can always send it in. But it would be good to kind of send it in within the timeline that they allotted. So any other thoughts or questions? So Cynthia, Cynthia says she's excited to use her prior background in communications. Yes, that certainly overlaps, but that it can seem overwhelming. And that's why we want to send you, my testimony that already we wrote, and then the recommendations, because, you can just say, as others have suggested, I wouldn't plagiarize someone's testimony word for word. You would make it personal. But if you see a recommendation, you can say, I have heard this recommendation. I agree with it. Because, I think, again, the legislator wants to have solutions. And I think one of my favorite, I was a preschool teacher and a director, and I did that for 10 years and then started this work. And I will never forget meeting with a legislative staff person. And I was like telling her, and this is how it is, and we need this to be fixed. And then she said, like, well, what do you want me to do? And that's a really hard job, to take all of the information that we are giving them to say, what should we do? And you can say, I need a way that we can get public dollars to support a private system to give us some funding to make sure we can continue. We need a way that we can buy into bulk purchasing so that we can relieve our budgets of trying to buy PPE. You know, we need better communication with the superintendent and the school committee in my community. And even if they can't necessarily fix it, at least you're thinking of ideas of how you want to solve it. Just like, you know, we talk about in our Advocacy 101, if you're running a program. I recently did a workshop for California, and I usually use the snow shovel example, which I had to modify on the fly. But you know, in your program, if the snow is not removed and you hear from one parent, you might think, you know what, it's that one parent, all they do is complain. But if 3 parents say, you know, it was a little slippery coming in, you might, you know, okay, I'm going to make this a top priority. If like 5 parents, 6 parents, 7 parents, like if you were getting berated, you would do something. It's the same with legislators, right? They are getting so much input from people right now. I always have a legislator come and speak to a class when I'm teaching, and Senator Michael Moore from Worcester says, when you're running for office, people think that you don't know anything about anything. And then the minute you get elected, they think you're an expert in everything. So you're a healthcare expert, you're a transportation, you're a homeland security expert. And we know that that's not true. So we have to be the experts about early ed and care and school age and summer camps. We know those are also issues that are really important right now. And this level of collaboration that's going to have to happen is unprecedented. We can't just continue to do what we were doing before. All right. Any other thoughts or worries? Everyone's all fired up now. Like, what are you worried about when we get off Zoom? Like, how are you going to keep going? What do you need?
Just one quick question in the chat too. So
Okay.
I saw that just a clarifying question about the Joint Committee on Education and its relation to early education and care. So someone was wondering if it was still worthwhile to send their testimony to this committee now, or should they wait for a specific one related to early education and care?
This one is early education and care. I think I flew through that slide. I'm going to go back to that slide. This one is about early education and care. So the title of it is a virtual oversight hearing on the status of early education and care in the Commonwealth during the COVID-19 emergency. So they did it in 2 parts. They did the live one last week. They're doing another one tomorrow, and you can watch that one tomorrow, but I know that folks are also working to get programs open. But this is our time to do it. This is all about early education and care. So yes. That's a really good question. It's always interesting to hear what people's questions are, because it makes our job, you know, we can get better at the way that we're explaining it. Has anyone ever reached out to, has anyone ever been to Advocacy Day for early education and care? You can either give me a thumbs up. Shayna, we got your number now. We're going to get you all involved, Shayna. Nancy Toso has been, I know Dottie has been. So Advocacy Day is one way of getting involved. And I'm not going to ask you to answer, but really think about, if you have not made a connection with your legislator, this is a great opportunity to do so. You know, I had a question once when we were doing a workshop, and I was paired up with a political person, and somebody said, like, what's the best way to email your legislator or connect with your legislator? And I was stumped. And my colleague, who had definitely had more experience on the political side of things, said, well, do you like people asking you for money or complaining about things when you first meet them? And of course we don't, but we do that all the time to our elected officials. So I think we need to help support, you know, all these, you know, the commissioner who's trying to make these decisions. It can probably feel very lonely as you're trying to make some of these decisions. And we may not agree with the way things are going all the time, but we need to be part of the process. I think the other thing is, if you're seeing unintended consequences, like this policy was set up because of this, but this is what's happening in reality. So I think that would be another important thing to highlight. All right, anybody, any other reflections or thoughts? we'll talk about the next steps. So we will send a very detailed, kind of chock-full email with testimony. So you'll see my testimony. You'll see recommendations from other people who have testified so far. And then you'll see the slides from tonight. In the email, there are going to be links so that you can click on the links to find all the different pieces. Maybe now, since we're giving you 20 minutes back, you can watch the first 10 minutes of the hearing that happened last week. Because I think the other challenge we often hear is like, it can be intimidating. Like, what do I know about a legislative committee? And if you watch one, you'll just have a better understanding how it works. And then we are happy to help look and review your testimony that you want to send. We've already done it this morning. People were sending us information all weekend. So we're happy to help frame it for you, give some feedback. But I think what we've learned from this morning till now is as specific as you can be about the programs that you're serving. We also had some questions this morning with this tension of the subsidized world and the paying privately. Everybody needs to tell their story. And while we may have different solutions, part of the reason why we are where we are right now is because we don't consider this a public good yet. And so we need to make sure that we have an infrastructure of early education and care that families are going to be able to go back to. Another thing the legislators have been very interested in learning more about is how you've connected with families during the last 3 months. So to tell the stories about how you've supported, whether you've done distance learning, whether you've helped with food distribution or basic needs, or how you've worked with the community members around diapers, around activities for children. So any of that information, they were very interested in learning more about that. And then they were also interested for folks who had been emergency childcare providers and then transitioned to reopening. But anytime you can use real numbers. We had 12 preschoolers, now we can only have, we had 50 preschoolers, now we can only have 25. That's gonna have a big impact on your bottom line. So to give those real numbers, that we're losing this much money, and now we have added costs for cleaning supplies and PPE. And and you can say, we're just putting the numbers together, but anything that you can provide with some context would be helpful. Because I think part of, we had a call this morning with some legislators, and somebody asked, like, are you hearing this? Like, do you get what a big deal this is? And they do. But we need to kind of say, and this is why. This is the cost we're incurring. This is the work we're trying to do. This is how we're supporting children and families. So I think also, as you're thinking about what has your outreach to parents been, we heard this morning on another call that like 26 parents said they were coming back, and only 5 children came today. So, how are you thinking about this supply and demand questions?
Off of that, Amy, we have a great question.
Trina.
Can you talk about first, whether it's good for parents to write testimony, and then what is the most important message or most persuasive message from parents to the legislature?
Absolutely. Parents should definitely, I think there's a parent testifying tomorrow at the hearing in person. I think the parents are, we've seen all these articles, like how people are working at home with 2-year-olds sitting next to them. We did get a question today about whether parents who are coming back are working family, like, are they going to work or are they working from home? So I think, what do parents want and need? How are they making decisions? I would, you can say, like, be real about tuition. Like, this is how much parents are already paying. If we try to raise it 25%, it's not going to work. So yes, I think parents can be very persuasive and powerful in this testimony. Pratima, it looks like your coworker is ready for some sort of other.
Exactly. Oh, no.
All right, anything else? We want to be a resource for you. We want to help support you. You can do it. It's going to take time, but it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have, someone sent us a paragraph earlier, and we can help, translate that into testimony as well. Okay, so we'll send you the follow-up email now, so you'll have it. And was recorded, so we'll also, when that's available, I think it might be available soon, we will send that as well, and we'll post it. If you're not on our email list, because we've been using Facebook a lot, make sure you sign up for our email list so that you'll continue to get updates for opportunities like this. And if there's issues that you want to learn more about, please let us know, because we're happy to put something together, whether it's for your staff or your community, to learn more about advocacy. So thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to helping see all of your testimony and help you take a stand here this week for early education. Thank you.